Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was common practice in almost every parish in the United States to distribute communion under the appearance of bread and wine. We call this distribution under both species, two species, the species of bread and the species of wine, or the appearance of bread and the appearance of wine. When we receive communion, no one receives bread, no one receives wine. We receive, whether we receive one species or both, we receive the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. This is called the doctrine of concomitance. It was defined at the Council of Trent, and it was very important that it be defined because at that time, and even prior to the pandemic, throughout most of the world outside of the United States, communion was distributed to the faithful under the appearance of bread only. The chalice was only consumed by the priest and sometimes the deacon. There are many good reasons for this that I'll get into in a moment, but in our experience, this was unusual. During the COVID pandemic, the bishops of the United States instructed priests to stop distribution from the chalice for fear of spreading germs. Earlier this year, Archbishop Listecki gave all the parishes of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee permission to return to the distribution under both species, if the pastor of those parishes so desired. Monsignor and I prayerfully and carefully considered that option and have decided we will not return to distribution under both species. The biggest reason in favor of distribution under both species is the sign, the fuller expression of the literal words of Jesus at the Last Supper. Take this, all of you, and eat of it. Take this, all of you, and drink from it. We fulfilled that when we receive under either species. But let's consider the possible downsides of distribution under both species. The first and most serious is the real risk of even accidental profanation of the Blessed Sacrament. Anytime we're dealing with the Eucharist, we're dealing with God Himself, Jesus Himself. If a host falls to the floor, this should shock us and sadden us. We should respond with great reverence and care to ensure that we collect and clean and purify every particle of the host that has fallen to the floor, because in each particle is Jesus Himself. The same is true with the chalice, but it's much easier to clean up what looks like a piece of bread than it is to clean up the many droplets of wine that spill and scatter when the precious blood is spilled. St. John Paul II, in his encyclical Redemptionis Sacramentum, teaches that if there is even a small risk of profanation of the Blessed Sacrament when distribution under both species is performed, then we should not distribute under both species. The second downside of distribution under both species is that when a great number of people who choose to receive the Eucharist choose not to receive under both species if they are available, the sign of unity of the faithful is greatly diminished. A third downfall of distribution under both species, especially to a large congregation of people, as we have at both our parishes at most Sunday Masses, is the possibility and even likelihood of consecrating more wine than is going to be consumed by the whole congregation. This ends up leaving a large amount of the Eucharist under the appearance of wine left over after Mass. But we're not allowed to store the Eucharist under the appearance of wine in the tabernacle, and so he needs to be consumed immediately. This can leave the priest or the deacon or any extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion consuming actually a very large amount of Jesus. But because of the doctrine of transubstantiation, the effects of wine remain. And so that's consuming a large amount of alcohol. The fourth reason that distribution under both species is perhaps not ideal is the fact that in order to distribute under both species, you need a great number of ministers in a large community. These, as you know, are called extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. Extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion should be just that, extraordinary. But in order to distribute from the chalice on a regular basis, we would need to use them anytime we did so. And so they would become actually ordinary. this is not what the church intends. There has always been in the life of the church a very strong connection between the priesthood, assisted by the diaconate, and the Eucharist. In a sense, distribution of Holy Communion is the most fatherly thing that a priest ever does. He is providing spiritually food for his spiritual family. This is not to say that those who've been extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion in the past have done something wrong. No, in fact, they provided a great service to our parishes. But it is to say that in her wisdom, the Church, under the leadership of John Paul II, has discouraged the multiplication of, or the use of, extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion when not truly necessary. For these reasons, it seems clear to me and to Monsignor that distribution under both species is not preferable, and in fact has some significant pastoral downsides. As another Milwaukee priest said in his letter to his congregation announcing the same decision, our focus should not really be on the appearance of bread or the appearance of wine, but on Jesus himself, who comes to us, who gives himself to us under this appearance. Receiving from the chalice is a beautiful sign. And those who have assisted in making this possible in the past, those who have participated in this in the past, have done a good thing. But in our prudential judgment at this time, the best way forward is to distribute under one species only. I hope this helps you understand why we do that.